Bonjour, Paul. Oui, moi, je t'entends bien.
Et moi, je vois seulement des commandes noires.
Un écran noir.
Did you ever notice here when someone has a microphone, even when it's on you guys, everyone is redder than they actually are? Everyone was. That's why. Strong lights, Joe. Strong lights. I look better than dark. So I prefer less.
We don't have a makeup artist.
I prefer less lighting.
You ever see when Danny's over there?
Bonjour tout le monde. I hope you all had a great weekend et j'espère que la neige vous rend heureux. Donc, with that, I will call the meeting to order. Madame la greffière.
Adoption of the agenda.
Donc, could I have a mover and a seconder for the agenda? Conseiller Butler, Conseiller Crossman, are there any questions on the agenda? No questions. Everyone online is fine. Donc, we'll go to a show of hands for the vote. Donc, carried unanimously. Merci.
Adoption of the minutes of November 24th, 2025.
So could I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes, please? Donc, Conseiller Steves. Conseiller Bourgeois, vous l'appuyez? Les procès-verbaux, vous l'appuyez? C'est beau. Donc, any questions? None. We will go to the vote, which is a show of hands again. Merci. Motion carried. Madame la Greffière.
Declaration of conflicts of interest.
Est-ce qu'il y a des conflits d'intérêts? J'en vois pas. Merci.
And for new business, up first is the Kodiak Transpo Growth Strategy Final Report Presentation.
Bonjour. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council and staff. I'm Angela Lane. I'm the Director of Public Transit at Kodiak Transpo, and I'm here to do an introduction for our consultant who will be presenting the Transit Growth Strategy presentation. Lainey Stevenson is joining us here today. Lainey is a registered professional planner and professional transportation planner, currently working as senior transportation planner at Watt Consulting Group. She's been co-leading the Kodiak Transpo Transit Growth Strategy alongside Tanya Wagowitz, the Vice President of Transportation at Watt Consulting, and Lainey will be presenting the summary report today. Lainey has almost a decade of experience in active transportation, multimodal mobility, and public transit planning, and was previously the superintendent of transit planning and scheduling with the Regional District of Nanaimo, where she led local and regional transit service expansion and transit system growth prior to moving to Watt Consulting. So I'll turn it over to Lainey to do her presentation.
Merci, Angela. Bonjour, welcome. I think your light needs to be on, so we... C'est beau.
Good. You can hear me now? Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Angela, for the introduction. As Angela already said, my name is Lainey Stevenson. I'm a senior transportation planner with Watt Consulting Group. And it has been my great pleasure to work with Kodiak Transpo and the City of Moncton over the last year and a little bit on a transit master planning process, which has led us to the Kodiak Transpo growth strategy, which I will be here presenting to you today. So the growth strategy is a comprehensive short to long-term plan that guides continued success of the public transit in the City of Moncton specifically. The goal was to create a connected, efficient, and accessible transit system. And while we did focus on the City of Moncton, of course, you can't look at Kodiak Transpo without considering the regional integration between the City of Dieppe and the town of Riverview. The objectives of the plan were to sustain and increase existing ridership. So what we found and what I'll show you is that transit is working really well in the City of Moncton and ridership is growing, which is a great opportunity. The plan also wanted to address the equipment and resource constraints that many public transit systems are facing across Canada, while also planning for transit in new areas. So the City of Moncton is one of the fastest growing communities in Canada. I don't need to tell you all that, but it brings some exciting opportunities and some challenges. So those are the objectives of the overall growth strategy. The first thing that we looked at when we started the master transit planning process is we took a look at the foundation of Kodiak Transpo, how it was working today so that we can understand where we needed to get to in the future. What we found is that ridership is growing in the City of Moncton, which is a really great thing to see. In that, on this slide, you can see that there's an annual ridership graph that shows the growth of ridership between 2022 to 2025. And as you can see, it's more than doubled. There's almost 3.5 million people boarding transit last year, and we're seeing that trend upwards. So it's really great to see that people are using transit in the community as the community grows. What we also saw is that Moncton is actually in alignment with peers, other transit agencies that are comparable to Moncton, which is really great to see. So things are going well with the transit system. And another thing we noticed is that there's a really clear high performer when we're looking at all of the routes in the City of Moncton. And it's no surprise that that is the Route 51, which is carrying a ton of people every day. And oftentimes during peak movement, we're seeing buses that are full, which is, again, great problem to have and present some opportunities. So that's a picture of the existing system. As part of the process, we also went out and did some very big public engagement processes. We did 2 rounds of engagement. We started off by creating a project working group where we worked with other departments within the City of Moncton and, of course, with Kodiak Transpo staff. And we formed a working group which included staff from planning, engineering, environment, and finance, who's always good to have in the room. And we talked about how the cross-section of public transit integrates with other services across the city. We also talked to the staff that knows the transit system the best. That's the frontline transit staff, the operators, administration, the transit management, mechanics, supervisors, trainers, to try and understand what they're hearing and what they're seeing every single day in the transit system. And then, of course, we talked to the public. So we went out and we did multiple surveys. We did over 14 open houses, and we had 6 virtual roundtables where we talked to major employers and institutions, secondary institutions, about what they need for transit. we're very proud of the engagement outreach. We talked to over 1,300 people, which is a pretty big reach, and what it told us and what it reinformed is that people care about transit in Moncton, which is really, really great. Some of the priorities that we heard through engagement is that people want more direct routing and improved regional integration between the tri-communities. Like I said, this process was focused on the city of Moncton, but you can't take a look at the transit system that operates in the three communities without considering how the regional integration is working or not working. So we heard a lot about people wanting to move freely between the three communities. You know, they live in Riverview, but they work in Moncton, or they are in Dieppe, they want to get to the mall, or they want to get out to the airport, things like that are crossing multiple jurisdictions. We also heard that people want increased frequency during peak travel times, so that means more buses when more people are trying to travel, and on the key corridors, so hitting the key destinations where people are and where people want to go. We also heard that people want expanded transit hours, so more hours in the evenings during the weekdays, as well as better service on the weekends. So the way that the system is structured right now is that most of the service is during the weekday, and then it drops off on Saturday, and then it drops off even more on Sundays. And then for Kodiak Transpo, there are some holidays that are not served by transit at all. And so that was a really big thing that we heard, is that people want to have service on holidays. Maybe they're not working, or maybe they are working, but they still might want to go visit their friends or family, or they might have grocery shopping that they want to do on the holidays. But if there's no service, bus service, some people are not able to do that. We also heard that people want improved accessibility and safety at transit stops and on the transit network especially. I think today is a good example of where improved transit amenities could help users who are maybe trying to wait out of the snow and the cold and the wind. So things like better shelters that are accessible to people with mobility aids or strollers and things like that. We also heard that we want people want to review the transit fares. They want more affordable fares, especially for equity-seeking groups, maybe seniors or newcomers or persons with disabilities in the community. And then, of course, people want service to new areas. Moncton is developing, it's growing on the edges and on the inside of the city where transit service doesn't currently exist. And so people want transit to exist there so that it can be a viable option for them. So taking all of that information in, the foundation of what transit is in Moncton right now, what we're hearing from everybody, we created the Kodiak Transit Growth Strategy with 3 big moves in mind. The first one is that there needs to be some restructuring to the network and the routes to make it more efficient, effective, and convenient for people to use. And in restructuring the network, what we would like to do is start a layering system for the network. So we'll see things like frequent routes. We've got 3 layers. So frequent routes, which are the highest frequency serving the main corridors and key destinations in the city, where during peak time you'll see travel at 15 minutes or better. So it's super convenient and there's always a bus there waiting for you. The local routes, which is more a coverage-based route that's serving medium-density neighborhood areas and bringing people into the corridors or into the key destinations to access the frequent routes. So lower frequency, more of a coverage and more of a spread into the neighborhoods, but will bring people into those frequent routes. And then finally, targeted services. So these are services that are running during certain times of the day or to specific locations like industrial areas where we're seeing shift changeovers at specific times of the day. The second big move for the strategy is targeted improvements to hours of service. So like I said before, people want service to be extended into the evening, as well as better service on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, and added on holidays. So this plan strategically adds in the services and expands those hours. And then finally, the third big move is some interregional integration and consideration. So This is something we heard constantly is people want to move more freely and understand the system in Dieppe as if they're using it in Moncton. And so more conversations need to happen between the tri-communities on that, but that's a big focus of this plan. Some supporting measures within the growth strategy include service to new areas. So you'll see, I'll get to it shortly, but we've broken up the strategies into short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies. And so in the short term, we want to serve those areas that have already developed that need service now, including Ryan Street, Louisville Road, Harrisville Boulevard, and Assumption Boulevard. And then also, how do we strategically serve developing areas as new developments come online? In addition, upgrades to infrastructure, so improving amenities at transit stops, improving transit transfer locations, and then making sure that maintenance, snow removal, lighting, all that good stuff is being addressed. Future staffing and vehicle plans is also addressed within the growth strategy. So as I alluded to earlier, adding buses, adding staff is a challenge for many public transit systems across Canada. And so this plan addresses a strategic way to make sure that buses are continually being ordered to not only replace old buses, but also bring new buses online so that we can increase frequency and make transit more convenient. And then, of course, add staff who we need to run the transit system. And finally, the strategy considers policies to integrate transit with land use to make sure that the city is developing in a sustainable way that supports transit and vice versa, so that transit is supporting new development. This table's probably quite small for people to read, but and I won't go through each strategy individually, but what I would just like to say is that we've split up the plan into 3 sections, short term, which is the next 1 to 3 years, medium term, which is the next 4 to 8 years, and then long term, which is the next 8+ years. In the short term, the focus is increasing service hours. It's making scheduling efficiencies and kind of working with the resources that we currently have, understanding that right now resources are hard to come by. So it's focusing more in the short term about shifting resources and making things a bit more effective and focusing on regional integration rather than rapidly growing the system and adding a bunch of hours. That comes in the medium term. In the short term, there's also small adjustments to some routes to, like I said, access new areas that have already developed that need transit service now, while we get ready for a bigger route restructuring in the medium term. Other supporting things that happen in the short term are conversations about or actual transit facility expansion to make sure that we have room to grow, to add buses. Conversations about a new transit exchange somewhere in the center of town. One of the identified locations would be the Université de Moncton or around Morton Avenue, around that area. And then just increasing or adding new amenities, transit amenities, shelters, things like that. So that's the short term. Along in the short term, we've got, like I said, some small adjustments to the routes themselves to create efficiencies, which is more about reallocating resources and making the system more effective as it is now. The big changes are Route 50 becomes more streamlined, and it starts setting up as one of those frequent routes in that layering that I was talking about. And as the Route 50 realigns and becomes more efficient, the Route 62, which is primarily operating in the north end, starts to pick up some of the things that the 50 is no longer covering, and then also add service on Ryan Street, which is new. The Route 63 will also see some small adjustments and a reallocation of resources to serve Louisville Road and Harrisville Boulevard as those areas are rapidly developing. And then, of course, one thing that we heard often from many people is that Assumption Boulevard is lots of development is happening there, and it's so close to the city, so city center. So we found a way to add some service to Assumption Boulevard on the Route 68. In the medium term, like I said, this is years 4 to 8. These strategies are focused on a bigger restructuring of the route network to start really layering things in and add the frequent routes, which are now the Route 51, the green line, the Route 50, the red line, and then the Route 61 enters the ring as a cross-town connection. Rather than doing a bigger loop, it starts adding that connection across town from east to west, which doesn't currently exist at a high frequency, so it's not a convenient option for people. We'll see other changes in the routes themselves to make it more efficient, more streamlined, remove duplication, and also pool resources to add higher frequency, more buses to the places where people want to go. There's also more service hours being added in the medium term on the weekends where people want to see more hours, and then new holidays being added as well. So in the medium term, we're seeing a bigger need for more buses, which means higher frequency on the existing routes, and then more staff members as well to run the system. In the medium term, other conversations, obviously there will be many changes with stops and the addition and moving around of transit stops as the routes move. There should be a review of the fare structure at this time. Then, of course, conversations about battery electric buses and what that means for converting the existing transit facility to support that. This map here shows the major restructuring. I'm not going to go through every single route change, but what you'll see is some adjustments to make things more convenient and accessible for people to use. And we'll see the layering of the system from frequent to local to targeted routes. So the frequent routes are Route 51, Route 50, and Route 61, just to reiterate. And what we hope is that it's going to simplify routes and improve connections to major destinations across the city. In the long term, as this is 8+ years, it's a little bit harder to predict exactly what's going to happen. We don't always know how the puzzle pieces are going to be placed when we're thinking about development as the city builds out, but the strategy does address ways to carefully consider and strategically consider how transit is going to serve new developments and how hopefully new developments are going to pop up on key corridors where transit is already existing. But in the long term, as the new network has been reconfigured, what we'll also see is just addition of buses and resources to increase frequency to continue to make the transit system a convenient and reliable option for people. Again, this table is quite small, lots of information on it, but we just wanted to show some of the considerations in the budgeting and the resourcing and how it's being allocated across the entire growth strategy. What I will just touch on is that in the short term, it doesn't require as much resources because what we're trying to do is tap into regional integration and scheduling and planning efficiencies to reallocate resources to make the current system more convenient and efficient. And then in the medium term, that's when we're adding in more resources. It's going to be a little bit more costly because we need more buses and more staff to run the system, and there will be major restructuring. And then in the long term, it's all to be determined as the city develops. Okay, I'm coming to the end of the presentation, but before I get into the recommendations, I just want to leave you with 3 key messages of what I've talked about here today. The first being that transit is adding a lot of value to the community as it is right now. It's working really well. Ridership is growing. As more people come to Moncton and as the city develops, you're going to see a higher need for transit. But where we're at right now is the transit system is working really well. It's something to celebrate. The second message I'd like to leave you with is that the growth strategy that we've created was over a year process, and it's really a blueprint that was created by the public. We did a lot of public engagement. We listened to Moncton staff, Kodiak Transpo staff, the public, people who use transit, people who want to use transit, but they can't right now because it doesn't work for them. And we compiled all of that information into this growth strategy. So it was really written by the public for the public, which is really exciting. And then the third thing I'd like to leave you with is that there is some really good momentum right now in the public transit sphere. You've got a great system. People have been hearing about this plan. There's some really good momentum happening, and so it's really important to be able to harness that and continue moving that momentum forward so that your system can continue to grow. But it needs to happen in a strategic way, which is where this plan comes in handy. It's a step-by-step blueprint on how to continue to grow and harness that momentum. Okay, so without further ado, I will just go over the recommendations from us, the consultants. And that is to implement the Kodiak Transpo Growth Strategy, starting with Strategy 1, and move forward the strategy as the guiding framework for transit investment and service priorities, subject to annual budgeting process. The second is to explore a coordinated, enhanced regional operations and integration, and request similar requests from the town of Dieppe, the city of Dieppe and the town of Riverview, because, as I said, regional integration can't happen without the support of all three communities. And then finally, we think the plan should be distributed. It's a great plan that's had a lot of good work in it. And distribute it to partners, neighboring municipalities, post-secondary institutions, and major employers so that they can understand how transit plans to develop in the future. And they can start their master planning progress in conjunction to this and understanding what's going to be happening with transit. And finally, I'll just go over what the council recommendation is, so the official recommendation. That's hopefully worded correctly, but that Moncton City Council directs administration to implement recommended 2026 Kodiak Transpo improvements and to bring forward recommendations for future years' service improvements as per the annual budgeting process. Okay, that's all I have today. Thanks again for allowing us this time to provide the summary of the Kodiak Transpo Growth Strategy, and thanks for having me here today. We'll be available for questions afterwards.
Merci beaucoup, Lene. Councillor Butler, did you wish to move the recommendation?
I do want to have some questions.
Okay. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Crossman. Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. I agree with everything that you have here. But one of the biggest things, and I've sat on the board of Kodiak Transit for the council, and one of the things that I really found, and this would go to our CAO to maybe do a little bit more work with, and I think it's very important, you brought forward, is that the three communities, they can't be going off on their own. They, you know, and I certainly don't want to pick on one or the other, or maybe even us, but, you know, I think sometimes they come, you know, it's one place will want seniors free, and the other will want people 18 and under free, and another one will want 12 and under, you know, the free. We have to, one of the things that we don't do really good job at as our committee, I find, my own personal opinion, is that we don't try to see what's best for the Kodiak system itself. We kind of, well, okay, if Dieppe wants this, they do that, if Riverview wants that, Moncton can do this. So I think with our CAOs, what we should be doing, and my opinion only, but I would like for you to maybe talk to the city manager of Dieppe and also the town of Riverview, and let them know that, you know, myself personally, being the chair of the committee, and I've talked about it at the meeting before, is that it's almost at the point that almost every time we get to a meeting, somebody's got an idea that, you know, when I went on there first back in 2016, we were trying to how we're going to get the ridership up. Now we're at this point where we have the ridership that sometimes we have to leave people behind. The buses are so filled. Because of that, I don't think it's that we can all go off on our own little paths. We have to do it together, jointly. And I think that of all of the ones that you've talked about, the recommendation, I think that is if we're going to build it farther out and work together, like where we're going to need bus stops and where maybe Riverview is growing in a certain place or Dieppe's growing in a certain place, we have to all work together, and we can't be going off in our little silos. So so when you gotta leave your light on, press that button, again, sorry. When it turns red, you're good.
Perhaps, Counselor, I know you mentioned about working with Dieppe and Riverview. It's funny because this morning with the general manager and with the director of Kodiak Transpo, we had that conversation.
Okay.
So it's definitely something that as administration will follow up with Dieppe and Riverview on a combined strategy, for sure.
Okay, and my other one is that, and I think it's pretty simple, I think that one of the things we have to do, and I get calls from it, especially the one on Mountain Road near Sunshine, I get quite a few calls there from people that if they get off on the way up on 51 or 52, then what happens is that they have to cross 4 lanes of traffic to get to the other side, to go up Sunshine. If not, they have to go all the way up to the top, pass by the zoo, turn around, and come back down to get off on the other side. Most people get off, and they've said that, they see women and children trying to run across 4 lanes. So I think there's some things that are easily fixed that we have to really start, pointing our finger at and getting it done. But overall, I have to say, from the time I get on there to now, kudos to the staff at Kodiak Transit. I mean, just the buses, we're just getting around, getting new buses now, and how they go out and they work with the community. It's really they need congratulations for all the work they do. Really, they do. So thank you, Your Worship.
Merci, conseiller Butler. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la maire. Un commentaire préliminaire. J'ai 7 questions par rapport à ceci. J'ai 9 questions par rapport à la politique sur la subvention. Est-ce qu'on pose les questions maintenant et on les répète en réunion publique? C'est-il mieux que je pose pas de questions maintenant puis je les sauve pour la réunion publique? Ou...
Vous pouvez poser vos questions, mais peut-être en poser 4 et puis donner la chance aux collègues, sinon...
Ah non, c'est pas ça ma question. Je peux faire ça aussi. C'est parce qu'on va répéter probablement une présentation lorsqu'on va venir à la réunion publique. On va tout répéter ceci, on aura des questions. Peut-être qu'on minimisera les questions si on les pose maintenant. Mais on ne donne pas un bon service à nos citoyens et nos citoyennes qui n'ont pas, corrigez-moi, là, il n'y a pas de diffusion sur YouTube, puis Rogers n'est pas en train d'enregistrer ce site, right?
C'est sur YouTube.
OK. Alors, c'est enregistré? OK. Parfait. Ça, c'est ma première question. Merci. Et je remarque qu'il y a une personne de médias. Pour moi, il y aura un média qui va le desservir. Merci pour votre présentation. Merci, Angela. I also sit under the leadership of Councillor Butler on the, and with Councillor Richard on the governance committee of Kodiak Transit, the regional aspect of it. And we do shoot ideas left and right, but I just thought we needed something higher up, expertise, not to say that Angela and company are not experts, but objective viewpoint with maybe a more expertise, more specialized expertise. So this is really fun to look at. Now we have sort of a, doesn't mean that we don't get into the details like Councillor Butler specified this particular intersection. We could go through the whole 150 intersections that our buses go through, but we'll get to those details. But at least we have a general framework. First question, in your expertise, and I'm managing my expectations, but I expect this from you. When we do a needs assessment, you mentioned the word wants. This is what the citizens want, and that's fine. Everybody comes to the table, I want this, I want that. But in your expertise, did you filter all of these wants and transform them, sort of left behind some of the wants and focus on really what is needed, what is feasible? Can you sort of guarantee me this, that you put on your expert glasses when reading all of these wants and translated them into needs?
Thanks so much for the question, and I think that's a really good one. Yeah, people want the moon and the sun sometimes, and we want to be able to deliver that, but it's not always feasible. And so there certainly was some filtering, and we wanted to include as many wants as we could, but with resources that are restricted and, a certain amount of time and how the city is developing and all sorts of other different characteristics, we do have to translate them into needs. And so that's definitely what this plan does, is it does translate all of the wants into what is feasible and what is absolutely needed to continue to grow the transit system, to make it the most convenient that it can be, to appeal to the most amount of people, while, understanding the different resource constraints that we are currently operating in this economic environment.
Okay. That said, I appreciate that, because your expertise, who am I to go into details? But sometimes when we do these kinds of studies, we also have a "this is what we heard" report, where you go and you include everything that people want, so that if you consider 85% of them, put them in the plan, that's fine. But let's not forget the other 15 that weren't, so that maybe somewhere in a year and a half time, there's a federal program that comes out that, maybe we can tackle that one after all. So is there a what we heard report?
Yes, absolutely. We did one for both the first round of engagement and the second round of engagement. And so the first round of engagement has the broadest wants in it, I would say. And then in the second round of engagement, we're asking more specific questions. But the first What We Heard report is actually an attachment of the full Kodiak Transpo growth strategy report. So it's in there at the end of the report to reference for the future.
Okay, so you will leave that with Angela, the excluded parts of what we heard that is not in the strategic plan or the strategies, but they will be informed of that, so they keep it in the back burner somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I am a little bit confused. I'm not sure if it's you, but it would probably be to the city manager. In the recommendation, I just want to get clear what I'm voting on. It says that we direct administration to implement recommended actions for 2026, okay? Which would be strategies 1, 2, and 3, if not, well, that's, sometimes it calls phases and strategies, so that is also completed. But it's the action items, I think, the first 3, is that what we're voting on?
Maybe this might be a process question, I think.
Pardon?
I can take that. Thank
Okay.
you, Councilor Bourgeois. Yeah, that would be the 2026, because there is no cost to these measures, and they're included in your table in the PowerPoint under 2026.
There'll be 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah. So that's really, to give direct administration to implement the 2026 actions that are, cost neutral, and then we'll bring forward other recommendations as part of the regular budget process.
Okay, I got that, but in the risk analysis, it says phase 1 and 2 recommendations do not require additional funding and may commence in budget year 2026. So are we going with phase 1 and 2, or just phase 1?
Sorry if I may add, I think it should say strategy 1 and 2.
No, but it says phase here,
yeah.
so the terminology is already confusing, but it's not 1, 2, and 3, as in the action items. It says phase 1 and 2, which I mean to be, there's 3 major strategies, and there's part of it that's 26, part of it that's 27. But it says phase 1 and 2 recommendations may commence in budget year 2026, which is different from what we're asked. It's just a nuance maybe, or maybe a typo, I don't know, but can somebody clarify that? So we're
If I
just
could just look
doing
at the-
action item 1, 2, and 3, right?
Sorry, just to confirm, so I think it was just a difference in language when we're talking about phase 1 and 2. We talk about phase 1 and 2 for network restructuring. Phase 1 happens in the short term, phase 2 happens in the medium term, but I believe what that statement is referencing there is not the phases, and it's actually the strategies. So in 2026, we can see strategies 1, 2, and 3 move forward with some reallocation of existing resources.
Okay, but in the risk analysis, it says phase 1 and 2, which would start in 2029, so we're, anyways.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 are the action items that are on the table there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what the mover and seconder believe or agree or not. I'll just pitch it out there, but if not, I'll make an amendment. I've identified this before, there's nothing to do with you, but we never adopt documents. So we have one here again, and instead of adopting the document, we basically tell staff, the motion is to direct administration to implement recommendation 1, 2, and 3. And there's going to be an election, a new council is going to come in, and there's no document, and this is a document that we could adopt, so I don't see why we wouldn't adopt it if we're just directing administration to do something in phases that will straddle over two. I think we should adopt the strategy and implement recommendations. I'll make a motion, or if you are in agreement with that, I just don't see why we shouldn't adopt this. If we don't adopt it, we're just piecemealing the report every year.
Councillor Butler, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I've always been good with just a recommendation myself personally. This is kind of like to me, it's like a living file. It's changing all the time. So if we adopt this is exactly what we got to go with. And then if we don't go with it, then it's a recommendation. So it'd be better, I like it as like a live file that it can be changing a little bit. I just don't like to adopt this in concrete because we've talked about just the growth, or we're going to electric, we're going to different places where we're going to put shelters. This is all changing all the time. So if we adopt this, I just feel that the recommendation is that we as a committee at Kodiak Transpo will make sure we try to get it implemented. Staff is asked to implement it. I'm just not sure about adopting. That's mine.
I appreciate that, but the plans are not etched in stone.
I agree.
We can modify the plan regularly, just as you just indicated. So we could adopt the plan, modify it, if ever there is a need for it, and ask staff every budget year to implement it according to the phases. I'll come back to that later. That's one opinion, but I might make the amendment. I'll stop there if there's others that have questions. If not, I'll come back after.
C'est bon, merci, Councillor Bourgeois. Are there questions from anyone else here? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Bourgeois. Go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Merci, collègues aussi. What happens if Dieppe and Riverview refuse?
If they refuse to come to the table with regional integration?
Yep.
Well, that's always a possibility, and we're hoping that the conversations can happen in a way where we can explain the benefits for all three communities, so that doesn't become what happens. But you're right, then we just continue as we are, which is 3 separate planning processes, and where we're constantly hearing from the users of Kodiak Transpo that it doesn't feel like it's easy to move between the 3 communities. So that reality will just continue to exist. And hopefully, though, they would be able to see the benefit of things like interlining and sharing resources and cost apportionment and all of those great things that can happen when everybody comes to the table and does one single planning process. But right, it's always a risk that not everybody agrees.
I'll rephrase my question. One is a legal aspect, the other one is a practical aspect. What if they pick and choose? If I was at the Riverview or Dieppe Town Councils, Dieppe City Council and Riverview Town Council, and I'd say, yeah, I agree with Angela has 9 things before us that they want to. I agree with 1, 4, 9, and that's it. And we, from a Kodiak Transpo perspective, say, well, yeah, that might be good for you, but for the system, it doesn't work. So in principle, they agree to improve integration, but it comes back to us and we say, oh, okay, no, that's not going to work. I mean, I know you can't get into the nitty-gritty details of negotiations, but we have had some successes and some failures in collaboration between the 2 municipalities. I think it's gotten better over the years, but I'm just hypothetical discussion, and here lead to my legal question. Is there anything that would stop Kodiak Transpo, owned by the City of Moncton, to serve Dieppe and Riverview based on our strategies? Do we have the legal authority to provide bus services as a business to Dieppe and Riverview?
Go ahead, Nick.
Do we have the legal authority to provide that service? We do.
Okay.
We don't
So
have the
if-
obligation to, we have the authority to.
Okay, so could we impose on Dieppe and Riverview these conditions that would say, okay, we are going to, but, whatever measure we want to bring in for better system overall for the region, and they would reject 4, 6, and 8 measures that we propose, we'd say, oh, okay, we're going to do it anyways. We're going to do 4, 6, the whole thing that we want to, but Dieppe and Riverview, sorry, we're going to provide it anyways. Bad cooperation between the 3, but legally we could.
Well, I'm not in-depth familiar with how the governance committee works and how that whole thing works. I could get back to you with an answer on that. Angela may know now. I'm not involved with those.
By the time we get to the public meeting.
But my understanding would be that that's what the governance committee is for, right? To make those decisions.
Yeah, but I don't think we can impose anything at the governance committee to Dieppe and Riverview either. I don't think it's a binding agreement that way,
No.
right? Okay. Did you want to comment on that?
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
I was just going to say that the governance is that when we sit at the committee, we have 3 votes. When we implement something, the City of Moncton, Riverview has 1 vote, and Dieppe has 1 vote. So the governance that's why I was saying earlier that it'd be really good for our CAO to sit down and speak to both CAOs from them communities, so they kind of know what direction that when we accept this recommendations, this is the way we're going to go. So when it comes to meetings, we will, unless one of the 3 from the City of Moncton disagree with it and vote with them, but the governance was always set up that we would have as the.
Yeah, and I'm just.
Merci. Could I let
Just-
our CAO reply, please?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madame Deputy Mayor. I think, and I'm looking at Hélène and Angela here as this conversation that we had exactly this morning, is what you have in front of you is a growth strategy for the Moncton service of Kodiak, not the overall Kodiak Transpo growth strategy. And the conversation that we were having this morning is about combining the Riverview and Dieppe portions. So decisions and recommendations that are being made here are looking at the services that are rendered to the residents and the community of Moncton. So therefore, regardless if Dieppe or Riverview decide that they don't want number strategy 3, which is the Caledonia routing adjustments, it still, at this point in time, under the current structure, affects Moncton, the Moncton service. Did I get that right? So again, when we're adopting this strategy, we're adopting the Moncton portion of the growth strategy for the Moncton services with the idea that the regional collaboration, the number 1 recommendation is to work with Dieppe and Riverview to have a more regional approach. And that's where we would get into those types of conversations and ensuring that we have a combined growth strategy that affects the service that the interlinkages between the three communities. I'm looking at staff and they're,
The first sentence was, we're looking at Moncton.
Yep.
The last sentence was, we're looking at coordination with the other two municipalities.
but
So this is why, number one, enhanced regional coordination, which means working with the other two communities. This is why I was discussing this hypothetical situation. I just want us to be prepared intellectually that if we do have a refusal in part or in totality of whatever measures that will come from or included in enhanced regional collaboration, coordination, that we're ready to negotiate, or it might be at the governance committee, it might not be, it might be between the three municipalities in the end, but we had, not to say that we need to spend too much time on a plan B, but this is the number one recommendation on top there. So we have to be prepared for that. My last series of questions is the substance of it all, and I think Angela, well, maybe you can answer. First question is, how many additional riders do we anticipate to get by 2036?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it is on the slide, the anticipated annual ridership growth year over year based on the different strategies that are going to be implemented.
Okay, I did not look at the slide, I just looked at
Yeah.
the strategy. Which slide?
Don't have it here. Oh, thank you. So at the full build out, so after, I guess this would be after the medium term network restructuring, the growth would be about 28%.
28% growth, okay.
Which is over 1 million riders. So if we're at 3.5 million-ish now, it would be at 4.5 million,
Okay.
roughly.
And pardon me if I still don't see it, but pardon me if I don't. What are the anticipated revenues?
Oh, thanks. The presentation is back, so maybe I'll just, yeah, probably not helpful. It's very small.
How much, what?
Very small.
1.8 million.
So it would be a growth in revenue at, so again, this is after the medium-term strategies are implemented, would be 1.8 million more revenue
Okay, for the whole deal?
for the
All of the
short-term and medium-term.
recommendations
Yeah.
Together, 1.8?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, and then
and-
it's, the plan here, it sets out year over year what that would mean for each strategy and each year if they were implemented in that order.
Yeah, I want to compare apples to apples. So we started investing in 2027 until 2034. What's our total investments?
The total investment would be 4.2 million, so that's
Four.
over 4.2
Okay.
million. So with an additional revenue increase of 1.8 million plus the revenue that you're already getting, the net cost is about 2.7 million over the next 8-ish years.
Okay, could you repeat? I want to know what the revenues over the 7 years and the expenses, what you're
Sure.
asking us to invest versus what we're going to get back?
Sure.
Okay.
So revenues are 1.8 million
Okay.
and the expenses are 4.2 million.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And the difference is a net cost of 2.7.
Yeah. There will be people out there who will say, why would you invest 4.2 million if you're only going to get 1.8 back? What do you answer? What am I going to answer my citizens? Status quo would be cheaper.
Public transit is not meant to be a revenue generator for all communities. It is a public service to be offered to the community. It's much like, offering pool services or recreation services to the community. We know that we're going to operate them at a loss overall, especially considering capital costs and things like that. But the value that it adds is, not as comparable as the dollars. And so that would be my answer, is that public transit is not meant to be a revenue generator overall.
Oh, no, and that's what I tell my citizens now, because we're subsidizing Kodiak Transit. I think it's $6 million per year, that's the subsidy. The shortfall, whatever, taxpayers are paying 6, and that's what I tell them. Well, for the environmental, lack of parking, all that stuff, why should we spend another 4.2 million to increase that subsidy from $6 million a year approximately to 8.4 or 8.2 million, or whatever the difference is.
Yeah.
Still the same argument, we reduce pollution and all
Yeah.
that stuff?
I think you're right in that it provides many different benefits to the community, and it will address many different policy concerns that the city of Moncton has, whether that's economic growth or environmental benefits or mode shifting from vehicle usage to more sustainable transportation, whether that's walking, biking, or taking transit. So there are many other benefits that the investment will provide.
Okay. Aloma, you're here. When we issue a press release explaining why we would spend approximately $2.5 million more in subsidy, we have to have good convincing arguments to put out there. Thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci. Are there any other questions? Conseiller Léger, I believe, is online. Allez-y, Conseiller Léger.
Merci, Madame la Mairesse. Vous m'entendez?
Oui, très bien.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for the presentation and for the strategy. I think it's on the surface pretty challenging in terms of the next 8 years. A couple of things that I wondered is it's very focused on the functionality of the routes, the making them shorter, all that stuff. But were there things as well, if you're looking at that growth strategy, where do things such as bus shelters come into play? Strategically looking at where they go, is that part of this overall whole concept? Or is it simply going to be focused on the buses themselves and the speed at which the routes function in the city?
Thank you for that question. The growth strategy, the entire growth strategy takes a look at supporting measures in addition to network restructuring and reallocating and allocating resources. And it includes many different things. One of those things is taking a look at transit stops and considering things like placement, their safety, the amenities that exist there depending on the usage of the stop. So the full plan does consider how to make those decisions in a strategic and calculated way. It doesn't say exactly where all of the new bus shelters should go, because that might change as the system changes and as the network changes. More stops may become more busy, but typical principles and best policies about, you want these types of amenities at your transfers, and then at these, busier stops, you want these types of amenities, a shelter, things like that. So absolutely, the growth strategy does anticipate the need for amenities and transit stop improvements as the network grows.
And that's part of the larger document.
Correct, yes.
I have a question on and I like the way it's laid out. So if we look at the short term 2026 to 2028, just a question, something that struck me was that in strategy 6, it says expand Sunday hours from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. But I often hear, for example, that certain stores remain open till 10. And they're the people that are taking, that we're trying to integrate better into the system. So why did we limit it to 9 p.m.? I would think it should be something like 11 p.m. to allow those individuals that work in a variety of different service jobs in our city to have access.
Yeah, another great question. So the expansion of Sunday service or evening service and weekday service is happening in phases. So rather than adding, going straight from, let's say, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. straight to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., we're doing it in phases so that it's a little bit, it's more bite-sized and more feasible to actually implement. So you can get the resources in place, you can hire the staff, get the buses to be able to actually do that. But at phase 2 on Sunday service, which I believe you'll see in the medium term, you'll see that the hours are extending even longer past that 9 p.m. to be able to service the shops and things that are open a bit later.
So that was a deliberate approach.
Yes, exactly. It's a stepped approach to eventually build it out to what we heard that people wanted to see.
Okay. One of the things I often hear, I mean, that with respect to increasing the frequency and adding buses and so on, has to do a lot with our road system and how the road system does not function very well for our buses. I can use the example of Trinity. If you leave there and you go towards Mountain Road, and at that intersection, you can either go straight into Canadian Tire into that mall, or you can turn left, but there's no additional lane that turned right onto Mountain Road. So the bus sits there for 10 minutes or whatever the time frame is. So in doing this strategy, how closely was engineering involved? What is the strategy to take those points, those choke points out of the system to make the system function better?
Yeah, great point. I want to say that engineering was consulted heavily. That's how I feel. We talked a lot with engineering. They were part of our project steering group, and we talked a lot about how the transportation system can work for transit and make transit more efficient. So many conversations were had, and one of the recommendations or supporting things in the growth strategy is that collaboration between transit and engineering. So as roads are changing or active transportation is being added into the system, that transit is being consulted, and that we're having those conversations about how, especially if there is a transit line going there in the future or there already, how we can make sure that it's being incorporated into any road changes. Another thing that's also addressed in the plan is transit priority. And so this can happen in many different ways, but signal priority is one of the ways. So if we're upgrading signals at certain intersections, how can we harness the technology that we have so that as a bus is approaching, it's pinging the lights so that the bus can have priority through to make it more convenient and make sure that people aren't getting stuck for cycles on the bus at intersections.
But is that outlined in the plan? Like, is it just going to happen because of, well, it's time for us to update a particular traffic system at an intersection, or is it deliberate to say, okay, we've analyzed this, and as we move the phase forward, this has to happen? So you're thinking about, not you, but it's being thought out.
Yes, my understanding is that those conversations are already happening between transit and engineering at the moment. And within the full growth strategy itself, we do identify the key intersections where transit priority would be best to serve the transit system so that it can happen in a very measured way.
Okay. In one of your slides, you have the network restructure phase 1, and you have all of the buses in there, but the bus number 60 was omitted from the map. So you'll see there's no 60. It overlaps with 67. The colors are there, but anyway, 60 is not on the map.
I wonder if we could pull it back up.
Yeah, so if you look at the 67 in blue,
yeah,
and then if you look at the color, there's a color for the 60.
Yeah.
The colors are there on the map. It's just omitted, but for someone who's just quickly looking.
Yeah, thanks
mention.
for pointing that out. We can definitely get that updated.
Okay, that I think is those are the bulk of my questions, so thank you. I think that I'd like it to be more aggressive, I'd like it to happen faster. And I think maybe citizens would like to see things happen faster too, but this is the beginning, and maybe we'll have more conversations on what's needed in terms of accelerating this growth strategy as we are welcoming more and more people into our community who are taking public transportation. And I at least now a document that pulls it together. And I think in some ways too, whatever we do in terms of all of the improvements in the Moncton area, it is going to filter into both Riverview and to Dieppe to comparably have the conversations with their citizens to try to see how their system can improve to match the improvements that are being done in Moncton. So I think it will happen. It's great if the conversations happen ahead of time. But thank you for this, and I think it's a very good step. Thanks to Angela and everybody else who worked hard at giving input, and let's see what we can do. If we could only get buses faster, it would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Merci, Conseiller Léger. Conseiller Crossman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation. In your short-term strategies, that I guess that Excel sheet or that sheet, that page you had up, you had talked about 1 and 2 phases there, which I understand, or strategies is the word that I understand. But in your presentation, you also talked about decreasing rate fees or fares for seniors. But I didn't see that in this first year strategy from 2026 to 2028. Is this something that you have looked at that may have been, just when I went through the executive summary, I didn't see it as well. I didn't see anything on rate fares or decreasing rate fares for seniors. So can you maybe touch on this?
Sure, maybe this goes back to what we heard in the first round of engagement about wants and translating them into needs for the system. So what we heard as a want is that people want transit fares or a review of the transit fares so that there are more flexible options for people like seniors. Now, within the report itself, we did not make any recommendations about any decreases or increases to certain fare groups, but in the medium term, if we could maybe pull the presentation back up and I can point to at the very bottom, it talks about planning and implementation. Sorry, it'll be back a couple of slides.
So we're going back to slide, is it 7, the first year, the 2026 to 2028, or another one?
It will be from 2029 to 2033.
Okay.
So at the bottom, it talks about recommended infrastructure implementations and planning. So these are things that will go along with our route restructuring and adding more resources. And it does talk about review the fare structure at this time. So as the system is changing and as hopefully we have more conversations about regional integration, that's when we think conversations about changing the fare structure, adding discounts in for seniors or students or newcomers to the community, whatever you guys decide through a separate process. But we do think that that does need to be reviewed because it is something that we heard as a want from the community.
And I sit on the seniors committee here at City Hall with Councillor Bourgeois, and this has come up numerous times with regard, and I'm pretty sure, Angela, you heard about this at one of our committee meetings, that this seniors review be done on fares. So I know it's in your presentation, I appreciate that, and I did second the motion, but I think council should be having a earlier conversation than the dates that you have in your presentation being of 2029. That's 3 years away, that's another term of council away, and it's also the growth of seniors that we're going to see within our community between now and then is going to be increasing. So for me, that's the reason why I'm bringing up the seniors, and I'm bringing up the idea of looking at their fare structure now. I see Elaine has her light on between you and I, so I'll wait and hear what she has to say. But I really do think that this should be moved up within the plan, and it should be reviewed by not only our staff, but maybe your input as well on moving it up in the plan. So Elaine, if you could.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Crossman. I just wanted to clarify that fares are the mandate of the governance committee, and we do review requests periodically when they come in. And there was one from the seniors committee that was also discussed. So we can continue to do that as the plan is implemented and as, revenues and expenses are looked at.
Okay, great. So is there any, I guess I'll ask you a question. Is there anything that I need to do on behalf of the seniors committee to further this conversation?
I believe a response was already sent back to the seniors committee through, yes. Okay, so we expect it will be discussed again and we can inform
Okay,
the
great.
decision after.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That's all I had.
Merci, Conseiller Crossman. Are there other questions? I don't see any. I do have one. Donc, with regards to the traffic priority measures, and I've asked this to Angela a few years back, I think, we don't have priority of movement for buses with other vehicles, over other vehicles. So why don't we have that? I think it's so important because it gives a message, an important message to those of us who are in our cars and so on and so forth, that public transit is very good for all of us. And it slows down traffic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that maybe Angela wants to answer, but I believe that those conversations are ongoing. It's a technology question between what capacity or capabilities the technology on the bus has to talk to the signals, but a lot of the time that technology also translates into the same technology that's used for vehicles, emergency vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances to be able to change the lights. So the technology is there. I think it just needs to be harnessed and to identify perhaps funding for the project and to make sure that the buses are equipped with the correct technology. But you're absolutely right. I think it sends the right message to the community if you're prioritizing public transit. And yeah, instead of not wanting to be stuck behind a bus, people are going to want to be on the bus or stuck behind the bus.
Thank you so much. If there are no other questions, we'll go to the vote. And it's an electronic vote. Oui? Motion carried unanimously. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madame la Greffière.
Up next is the update agencies, boards, commissions, and committees policy deferred from October 27th, 2025. And I think Nick Rocha is going to present.
Thank you very much. So we have the documents in eScribe. As you're all aware, this item has been before council a few times. So we have basically what we've included in this item for today are the updates from the last time that this was brought to council. So there was a couple of items. One of them was brought forward by Councillor Bourgeois, which was in relation to having a minimum representation of 1/3 francophone members on committees. So we have included that in the updated policy. We have also clarified that although you could have a lead administration person who kind of facilitates reviews of committees, ultimately it's council who would make the decision on any changes to those committees. We've clarified that in the policy. And we've also clarified the nomination and approval process for new members for the committees. And so those changes are highlighted in the updated policy that's attached to this item. Those changes are highlighted in yellow. And if I can just briefly kind of touch on the nomination and approval process, which is outlined there. That's in section 3 under number 4, policy. So essentially, we have applicants for committees who may have applied, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months prior to an actual nomination being made where they might be considered. So the process is we have those applications. Administration would go through them, discuss them with the mayor. Once there are nominees selected, they would be contacted just to ensure that they are still, I guess, wanting to be considered, because they may have moved to St. John, they may no longer have interest in that particular committee. So we just have to make sure that they're still interested. They're not advised that they're being considered. They're not advised when council is making a decision. It's just a question that we would ask of those potential nominees to say, are you still interested? Council will be provided with the list of nominees the week before the meeting, and you're invited to provide feedback to the mayor or a deputy mayor in this case. And then ultimately, it is still the mayor's decision who they want to bring forward as a nominee. The morning of the meeting of council, where those nominees are considered, all of the applicants would be notified that council is going to be making nominations to that committee. So it's not just the nominees who are notified, it's all of the applicants, so that they're made aware that there will be a decision made. So hopefully that alleviates any concerns about decisions being kind of pre-made about the nominees before council has a chance to make their decision. And it's always council's decision whether or not they want to accept a nominee. You have the right to vote on that, and the mayor has the right to bring forward the nominations. So that basically summarizes the changes that have been made since the last meeting.
Merci, Nick. Other questions, or could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Steve, do you wish to move the motion? Councillor Butler, do you wish to second?
Second one question.
Okay, and Councillor Steve, you have a question as well. Go ahead.
Hi, Nick. Just to follow up, who is it that makes that phone call to the individual to ask if they're still in the city and still interested in being part of that? Is that a consistent individual?
I believe that's Nicole. Would that be?
So sometimes it's the staff lead, but going forward, it would be me.
Okay. Sometimes it's the staff lead, but going forward, it would be Nicole. It would be the executive assistant to the mayor.
Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Nick. I've been one of the biggest pushers about this and the rubber stamping, but I will say is that, you know, there's nothing wrong with advising people that if 6 people applied that, and we only want 4, that, hey, listen, you made the short list, right? All 6. So to me, it's, you know, and I've talked to people that have been on committees, so we must be doing something wrong, because when I've spoken to them, when they get the call, they've called me and said, hey, listen, I'm on this committee, what do you think? Is it a good committee? Like, so there was something missing. If it's, to me, as a councillor, as an elected official, I don't feel that it goes, the staff makes a decision, then the mayor looks them over and agrees, and then it comes to us, and I feel that I'm rubber stamping something that's already been done. I did read this, I agree with this. I would like to have, when somebody is speaking to the group that are checking to see if you still want to be on that, the phrase I would say is that, because I've been to a number of organizations where people were called and said, okay, you made the short list. It's like if you were being hired by the city, you made the short list, here we're at. And when it comes to council, the mayor will send it out to us, then we can decide if we're going to support them or not. But there's got to be some kind of, you know, it's almost like when you're hiring, you know, we go to hire somebody, you know, we have private meetings. But when it comes to that, like, and I always remember the last time with planning, the mess we got in. You know, asked for emails, you know, what you thought. We gave our voice, and all of a sudden, everybody and their dog had the emails, and there was nothing confidential. So I think that we have to learn from that. That was a learning curve for me. You know, you're asking for a person's opinion, but everybody has a chance to read them. And to me, there should be some type of a feeling of confidentiality when I'm sending an email to the mayor of how I feel about something. But if it's not there, then, you know, to me, I would just soon dismiss myself and not even get involved, because to me, that last time was a total mess. So is there anything underneath our bylaws or underneath the Municipalities Act that can cover a councillor? Because if I make a phone call to her, you know, she could reply that, well, listen, Councillor Butler called me, not saying you, Paula. Councillor Butler called me and said, well, you know, he doesn't really like your approach to this or that. We should have some type of confidentiality support for that. Go ahead.
Actually, under the Right to Information and Protection of Privacy Act, it's actually the opposite. Your personal opinions about somebody else are essentially their personal information. And they would have a right to know that.
So when we don't, let's say, for instance, we reverse that. Let's say we're going to hire somebody for the Board of Works. Or let's say we're going to hire a city manager. We had to sign a confidentiality report for that form, so we wouldn't talk about it.
Hiring's a different matter, and I mean, if you're asking for a legal opinion, we really can't get into that in this.
I hear you. I'm bad. So I'll just say that I find it still difficult, that I feel that when we're bringing them on to work and represent city council, that we can still, we have to keep our mouth shut because we don't want to get out to public. And if we say something, we get in trouble. And the next thing you know, somebody's under an investigation. So to me, it still doesn't work. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci. J'ai 9 questions. Je commence avec 4, 5. Tu me couperas quand tu voudras. Merci beaucoup, Nick. A lot of my concerns were addressed, so I really appreciate it. There's a couple of boxes, responses that you say this is beyond this review, this is a political matter that council, so I will be talking about those points especially. Page 2, the item number 3, one of the questions that wasn't adequately addressed, in my opinion anyways, my question was, why is only staff entitled to review an ABC outside of the quadriennial review by council? The policy says a review of ABC should occur at the end of each council's mandate, right? But this exercise, the review in between, like in the middle of a mandate somewhere, that the exercise should be led by lead administrator or others as designated by the city's chief administrative officer. The example, I didn't put it in my comments, the Enhancing Democracy Committee. I asked several times during 25, even starting in 24, where was the Enhancing Democracy, did it still meet? And nobody seemed to answer clearly. It was sort of a hiatus, and then all of a sudden we learned several months into my questioning that the members had, if not all, most of them had retired or withdrawn, quit, whatever. Nobody told council. This is a committee of council established by council. It's not an internal administrative committee established by the CAO or department. Nobody informed council that that committee was no longer meeting, was no longer doing anything, really. Should not that have triggered a review of that committee once they could no longer have a quorum? I'm assuming if most, if not all of the members quit, then the committee of council could no longer meet. Nobody told us. So how do we prevent that kind of situation from repeating itself? That was my concern. So if staff didn't do it, because under the policy, this exercise should be led by lead administrator or others as designated by the city chief administrative officer. In between the 4-year review, or in this case, 5-year review.
I guess this is the reason why we're introducing this new policy now, to have stricter guidelines on how we deal with those situations. So we have terms of reference in here, which talks about frequency of meetings and that kind of thing. So I would like to think if in the future, if there was a committee that wasn't meeting or anything like that, we could address that situation with the new policy. So,
it didn't happen.
I understand, but now we have a policy and we can follow that.
So that by including the bottom part of 3.1 review and ABC, staff would be obligated to report to council that there's a committee that is now defunct or no longer meeting. Is that what you're telling me? I'll be fine with that. If that imposes an obligation on staff to inform council that one of its committee is no longer meeting.
Yes, I mean, if we have a council-approved policy and we find out that there's a committee that's not meeting their obligations under the policy, then we would review and we would bring forward any kind of changes or recommendations that need to be made to council.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 4 on page 3 says basically, council is given the authority to investigate a violation of this policy. And your response is, this is beyond the scope of this policy. And the example that I used was that a member of an external ABCC appointed by council, the member was appointed by council, made a derogatory comment in public against one member of council. This was in violation of our code of conduct, and you would address it somewhere else. But here's a review of an ABC. I can tackle this and where you discuss it further about imposing the code of conduct. And give me a second to find it. Yeah, I think it's under item 12. You say section 19.5 refers to this. Well, section 19.5 does not say what council must do in this case. So how do we implement this? How do we make sure that council members, but also other members of ABCCs, you say also, or you propose also, that external ABCCs have their own code of conduct or policies controlling the behavior of their members. And again, I'm using the example of a member of one of the ABCCs external who made derogatory comments about a member of council. What if their code of conduct does not deal with something like that, or is not as, or does not deal at all with code of conduct? Can we impose our code of conduct on our delegates to external ABCCs? Either if they don't have a code of conduct themselves, or if their code of conduct is not as comprehensive, exhaustive as ours.
So the Code of Conduct bylaw applies to elected officials. By including it in this policy, we are saying that all members that we appoint should abide by that same general standard of conduct. If they don't, I think it would, there could be, if there was an issue that was raised, then subject to the rules of that external ABCC, in terms of council's authority to remove members, council would likely have the authority to remove the member, unless, like I said, subject to, because there are certain mandated, legislatively mandated committees that we can't do that on. But otherwise, council would have the authority to remove one of their appointees likely.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, and I don't want to dig up the past, but in that case, in that specific case, we were told that the ABCC, the external ABCC, had their own code of conduct. And they had an investigation, we've never seen it, the results of which that person stayed on the ABCC. Council may or may not have said, we want to exclude him or her from that ABCC because of the comments made to at least 3 members of council. So are you saying that with this new policy, then we could impose our code of conduct regardless of whether or not the ABCC had one?
No, what I'm saying is that, you would be subject to the code, that, I really can't get into the specifics of that particular case, I know the one you're talking about, I don't think that this is the forum to be discussing that, but I'm saying that there are certain circumstances where council is still going to be subject to the legislative requirements of the external body in question.
So we can't review our nominees, appointees according to our own code of conduct, in a nutshell?
Under
If
certain
they have one,
circumstances.
yeah.
Under certain circumstances.
Okay. I can stop there and come back later if others have questions. Continue, oui?
Oui,
Okay,
non,
merci.
excuse-moi. Non.
Okay, I'll skip this one. Item 7, page 4, you say this is a political question that should be determined by council. Appreciate that. So what do? Do I make a motion to modify the policy and then see what council thinks? Is that the way that we deal with it as a council?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, so could I make him, I guess I'll ask another legal advice question based on our discussion about the member who, do we need any legal obligation before we can just remove a member to an external ABC or even an internal ABCC? In using that same case, did we really need to have a legal obligation? We could not remove a committee member, a delegate on any given time?
Correct, we couldn't. There's nothing that we could change in our policy that would have changed the situation.
But I want to be clear. Can we have a policy, maybe it's in there, maybe it's not, that we could remove any one of people we designate a Transaqua, CRPA, whatever? We have delegates at any given time, or should we say we limit the mandates to 1 year and then we review it after 1 year? What's our option here if we wanted to remove a delegate to an external ABCC? What are our options?
I think
And my suggestion was at the time that there be a clause at the will of council or something to that effect.
I just want to review what the current wording is in the policy.
It mostly refers to appointing, but not removing. The role of council is to make appointments to ABCCs, but removing appointments, it doesn't seem to give us any authority here.
We can, I can review it before this comes to be ratified publicly. If there's wording lacking, I can email council and I can propose wording that we can bring to public. But again, any authority of council to remove appointees is always going to be subject to any governing legislation of certain external bodies. So there'd always be limiting language in that type of clause.
Okay, so a sub-question to that one. If the ABCC has a clause that says nominations, appointments from the city of Moncton must be a minimum of 3 years, we have no authority to say, no, we're just going to appoint somebody 1 year at a time?
Correct. If it's a provincially created body, and there's terms that are set by legislation, then we can't override that with our own
Okay.
policies.
Appreciate it. Merci, Nick. I think there's 2, 3, 4 more. Number 10 requires that no ABCC should meet less than twice a year. Again, using the Enhancing Democracy Committee, can you assure me that not only at the end of each council mandate, but somebody will be policing this, patrolling this, making sure that they do not meet less than twice a year? So somebody from staff will
Yes.
tell council?
Yeah, we can, if there's an issue, there's somebody from staff who will be able to address it, yes.
Okay, perfect. On page 7, oh, no, I already addressed that, sorry. When I skipped earlier, numbers have their own governance requirements. Page 8, number 18. In the role of council, the ABC, my question was, the ABC shall also refrain from using the council member's title when referring to the membership. My concern was, at one point during this mandate, a member of council decided to sit on an external ABCC, and her title, when the report of that, it was a task force, I'm not sure if it qualifies under ABCC, but let's say it was an external organization, and a member of council decides on her own, or his own, to sit on it, and wear the title of Councillor, City of Moncton, Mayor, City of Moncton, and it's put on a report that afterwards, the member was not nominated, was not appointed by council, and signs off on the report with the title. How does council make sure that if somebody wants to sit on an ABCC, they don't put their title unless they have been appointed by council? Does the new policy prevent this or make sure that it goes back to council?
Well,
Because I could be asked by the province tomorrow morning, could you sit on a provincial review of municipal finances? And I would sit as Daniel Bourgeois, City of Moncton, and one of the recommendations would be to eliminate provincial subsidies to the City of Moncton. And somebody could argue, hey, look, City of Moncton rep is in favor of it because it's in the report, and he signed the report saying Daniel Bourgeois, Councillor, City of Moncton. So how do we prevent that?
So the new policy does state that if there is a member of council who is appointed to a committee, not as a councillor, but as a member of the public, that they not use their title when participating on that committee. We haven't gone the additional step of requiring that elected officials would notify council anytime they've been appointed to a committee like that. If council wanted us to add that, you could make a motion and we could add that requirement.
Okay, so I'll make that motion to add some sort of obligation to divulge, or even better, just sit as an individual, that's fine, but don't put your title associating the City of Moncton unless council gives its okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how to word that motion, but as long as you understand my intentions.
Well, we already have that. That's already written in there that if you're sitting as an individual, you're not allowed to use your title. That's already there.
Right. But what if somebody does? How do we punish? How do we correct that?
Well, you would ask them to remove it as per the policy.
Okay, so we would ask let's say it's a task force, and they would write their report, and they would say, Daniel Bourgeois, or Councillor City of Moncton, we would ask that they removed. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci beaucoup. Are there other questions? If not, so do we have to bring this, do we have to make some adjustments to this again?
I'm going to review the policy just to see what the language is around council's authority to remove appointees. I'll see what the policy says. I can send an email to council prior to Monday's public meeting when we'd like to ratify this. If there are adjustments that need to be made, I can advise what those adjustments are. Or if it's already addressed in the policy, then I'll advise council what it already says. So.
Thank you. Perhaps when you do this, Nick, we could also look at, under purpose statement, item 4, which says, when considering the appointment of residents and individuals, it should reflect the diversity of the community, but it should also, perhaps more than anything else, reflect the bilingualism of our city. I think we need to not shy away from the word bilingual because it's an asset that carries us everywhere. It makes us the envy of many across the country, and we're an example of how we get along and how we work together. I think we should make sure that everything that we do reflects the bilingual nature of the city. Is that okay? Oui, c'est bon. So are we voting on the motion, or are we going, comment on fait ça, là? So Nick, how do you want us to proceed then? Because you do have to make some adjustments. So
I think if council is comfortable voting on what we have now, and like I said, I will send council a note about the removal language, and if there's any adjustments to be made, council can vote on that Monday, or if it stays as is and people are satisfied, then they can vote on that also.
C'est bon. Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, so we will go to the vote then on the recommendation. Conseiller Kingston, okay, are you there? If you are, could you vote, please? Thank you. We close the vote. I believe the motion was carried unanimously.
No, it wasn't unanimous. There was.
Oh, I didn't see it. So. Who was the nay vote? Come on. No, I don't have the results.
They didn't close the vote. Right. Justin can share with the results were.
I can go back to look.
Oui.
Yeah, please.
Councillor Butler was nay.
Okay. So the motion was carried with one nay vote, and it was Councillor Butler, correct? C'est bon. Thank you. Merci. Madame la greffière.
Up next is Downtown and Heritage Financial Incentive Program Policy Update, and Luc Babineau is here to present.
Bonjour, Luc.
Bonjour, Madame la Mairesse adjointe et membres du Conseil. I'm here this afternoon to seek Council's approval on the updated financial incentive program for the policy of the Downtown Core Community Improvement Plan, designated heritage properties, Downtown Business Improvement Area and Central Business District until December 31st, 2027. And sorry, I won't say that long word many times. I'll refer to program or policy. La politique actuelle expire le 26 février 2026. In 2015, the Downtown Core and Heritage Financial Incentive Program was launched as a pilot, and it was really to address two challenges in the downtown. First, redevelop underutilized downtown land, and second is to bring forward more built density in the downtown. And in 2018, the Central Business District and the Business Improvement Area program was launched, and the Downtown Core and Heritage program was also extended. I'll just show you a quick overview of the program. So this is showing there's minimum investment in the downtown core of, if you're a heritage building, you need to be at least $500,000, et les autres projets doivent être plus que 1 million. Le programme de ZAA et QCA doivent être 10 millions et plus. So 10 million plus for the CBD and BIA program. And the duration of the grant as well. So projects over 10 years get a 10-year grant term, and projects under 10 million get a 5-year grant term under the Downtown Core and Heritage. And the BIA CBD grant is 3-year grant term and a 5-year grant term if the developer installs more than $500,000 in public infrastructure. Alors, je vais juste vous montrer un peu la map. Le Downtown Core and Heritage program is outlined in blue, and the CBD and BIA program is outlined in red. This is to show the programs that were approved by council. So there's 16 projects that were approved since 2015, and 14 of them are finalized and 2 are under construction. Those are Tower 3, the Lafford Tower 3, and the 30 Waterloo, which is still under construction. Just also to let you know that the programs have, there's 16 projects have benefited from $223 million in building permit, and the assessed value is $264 million. So some of these programs, or projects, development, are not already finalized, so we'll see an increase as well. And also, just as a reminder, council also approved 3 other applications, so that will count to the overall total as well. Also, just to mention again, 1,001 downtown residential units are tied to the financial incentive programs. And the financial incentive program is really there to help support the vision of more downtown density and downtown living. Our department has a pretty healthy pipeline of downtown and heritage projects that includes multi-residential development. Also, council has approved projects that are already approved by either PAC Planning Advisory Committee or council approvals. So there's more projects in the pipeline that council has already approved. I also want to share some very recent data that we received from CMHC. So nationally, the vacancy rate rose from 2.2% to 3.1%, so now sitting above the 10-year average. And specific to Moncton, the rate increased from 1.6% to 3.9%. I'm just going to give you a quick program review, which is also part of your package, but I just want to mention that the program review involved many departments, including legal, finance, planning and development, economic development, environmental planning and management, and there's a few of us in the room today. As a result, we are recommending the following improvement based on discussion with administration. So the first one would be the definition of affordable housing, which has been updated to align with the criteria under the provincial and federal funding program. So the simplified definition means a dwelling unit that is considered affordable under a provincial or federal funding program, which is the definition all local municipalities are now referring to. There's been some changes to the energy modeling report, which essentially was to update the Tier 3 and the 2020 National Building Code, and also the National Energy Code of Canada. There's been also a definition of municipal infrastructure, which has been changed to public infrastructure, and that is to expand the utility infrastructure. So that would include telecommunication, energy, and gas. So those proposed would now be eligible for the 5-year grant. There was a small word added to surface parking lot, which was outdoor, so that was due to a legal review. And the second thing was policy. So we did, we're asking for a final certified report from a qualified professional for all utility-related infrastructure. The other policy change was introducing a separate receive and approval deadline. So we're adding November 12, 2027 to be received by, to ensure sufficient time for council to approve by December 30th, 2027. Because this year, or last year, sorry, in December, we did get many applications at the very last minute, and we did not have enough time to bring them to council. But luckily, we did have many developments that are moving forward, I guess. So that's the positive news. Moving to the grant evaluation form, there's been some changes to the active transportation definition to include short-term and long-term bicycle parking. There's been some edits there to requirements as far as more with the traffic demand management. As I mentioned, the energy modeling report, we did update the Tier 3 of the 2020 NBC and the Tier 2 of NECB. Those are all acronyms regarding energy modeling. The net zero ready definition was also clarified. We did make some changes to the sustainable roofing. So now we're asking applicants for at least 50% of the roof. Sorry, we're in the bonus points. We're not asking, it's basically bonus points. If they do at least 50% of the roof, or as a green roof, they would get points to their application. The third one was the grant payment agreement. We did add a termination for convenience. And so basically that is to satisfy financial institutions, and that is clearly now defined in the legal agreement. Just to go over some affordable housing consideration that our department and the multiple departments did talk about. Basically, as I mentioned, the definition of affordable housing has been updated and now is aligned and is going to be current with the criteria for provincial and federal funding programs. As I mentioned, I'll just repeat, meaning a dwelling unit that is considered affordable under a provincial or federal funding program. So there's also some possibilities that the CMHC programs and guidelines could change during the city's policy period. So therefore, that is why we've made that recommendation. As an example, there's one program using median tool income, and others, most, I guess, funding programs are using median market rent, so MMR. So there's a risk if the definition in the policy is not changed that some developments in the downtown would not qualify for the program based on a technicality of the definition. So also just to reiterate, in the program, we are requiring an affordable housing of 10% of units, and applicants that receive additional points are the ones that are doing 11% or more, or 16% or more are getting 15 points, and you're getting 20 points if you're doing 20%. So in some cases, there are developers that are needing those points to qualify, so that's why they're doing different things. So whether it be energy modeling, green roof, affordability, so they have that option to do more than 10. And we are going to give them more points to achieve. You need to achieve at least 100 points to qualify. And if the policy was require affordability levels beyond the 10% threshold, the city would need to collect additional information. So example, like annual rent rolls would be one that would show the units to be affordable. And I also want to mention that the city is also not in a position to monitor and enforce the rental rates for compliance. If we do have additional affordability criteria, we go by what CMHC is mandating nationally. Also mentioning, based on discussions with CMHC and lenders, CMHC does monitor for a set duration of 10 years, and some are actually for 20 years, so depending on what program you apply to. And also the city cannot control who rents the affordable units in these private developments, and to see if they actually are leased to people in need. So that would be one where we think non-for-profits would be better suited. So currently there's 2 Housing Accelerator Fund programs, and based on creating more affordable housing. Additionally, the municipal land disposition policy allows selling municipal land to non-for-profit organization. And we think there's other ways that the city could increase and contribute towards affordable housing. We're also, as an example, it could be considered an affordable, it could consider an affordable housing incentive program, which could apply citywide, so just not downtown. As a reminder, this is specific to downtown and heritage property. And also, as I mentioned, they need to go to the ones that really need affordability. Just a second, that's on the affordable. We did have a developer and stakeholder consultation. So last year we did talk to a lot of developers in recent week as well. So we had a lot of discussion. I'll just read a few of these. They're all part of the package. Some of them are saying increased lending costs and inflation material are impacting returns. So creating challenging development environment. The financial incentive tool has been a very helpful tool. And I will say we heard this in this same room during the municipal plan consultation with developers. So this one, the incentive is working very well. City leadership and elected officials should be commended and reminded of the successful environment they have helped to create. And also we're hearing that the project would not have been feasible without the program. A lot of the majority of developers have financing with CMHC as well. So they also want to mention there's a lot of active, or I guess a few that we know of, active developments that are currently in the underwriting process. And basically, they have intentions to apply for the program, but they are going to be doing 10% affordability. So that's based on what they're currently doing with in the underwriting process. The policy is creating more housing supply. We've heard from developers as well that the increased downtown housing and multi-res is generating new retail and service opportunities. So we're seeing that in recent developments. We're also, developers are responding positively to a minimum 10% affordability. And we're also hearing projects could be considered in jeopardy or would not happen if we do more than 10%. There's been, and if you have the whole package, but I'm just going to mention a few here that we're also, if adding the municipal affordable housing requirement, developers could turn their attention to outside downtown or other local municipalities without these conditions. We are hearing that private developers are willing to create more housing supply. We've seen that, and I've mentioned the number. We have over 1,000 units that were created. Stakeholders think the city would see less applications should we put additional barriers, so meaning the 10%. And also, we've heard from one developer that the market is self-regulating based on the new CMHC vacancy rate of 3.9%. And also, we're also hearing to create more affordable units, a new program would need to become more robust to reduce the cost. It's all about creating less cost for developers. And again, these are feedback after multiple consultation based on different, including the municipal plan review based on discussions and networking events, multiple phone calls as well with these private developers. I just want to quickly touch on the local municipalities as well. So they are all basically going with a simplified definition of CMHC because as we know, there's these housing, the Housing Canada, Built Canada, sorry. So yeah, Built Canada as well and CMHC. There could be some new funding opportunities for developers and also for non-for-profits. I can just talk about what the city does. For us, the building permit and planning fee is for vacant properties. Some other municipalities are actually tying and giving a portion of or a tiered approach to the building and planning fees. But in our case, it's basically, it goes for vacant land already. So we can't create that additional, it's already incorporated in the policy. So in summary, should council adopt the recommendation, a review of the program will be considered again in 2027 to review with the economic condition, policy direction, and the city's progress towards various strategic objectives. The plan for downtown moving forward will be updated through the municipal plan. So currently it's with the Downtown Core Community Improvement Plan. So following this, we'll do a very comprehensive financial incentive program policy And in policy direction may recommend a creation of a similar program that would be specific to non-for-profit housing providers. Also, just want to clarify, if there's new applicants coming in the system, they will apply to the February 2nd, 2026, so that ratified date policy. And that concludes my presentation, and I do have the recommendation here. So I don't know if City Clerk, if you want to read, or do you want me to read the...
Merci. Merci beaucoup, Luc. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the Conseiller Butler, Conseiller Badgett? C'est bon. Donc, are there any questions on this? If not, is anyone on virtual? Oh, Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la maire. Merci beaucoup, Luc. 5 questions. Il y en a qui sont très mineures, mais je vais commencer avec la grosse. À un moment donné, on va mettre fin à ce programme ici. C'est dans 3 ans, dans 5 ans, dans 10 ans, je ne sais pas. Puis ça ne devrait pas attendre au moment où tout le centre-ville a été rempli. Il faudra qu'il y ait une réflexion de là-dessus. Je suis content que vous allez le faire en 2027, mais je ne m'imagine pas que ça va être, que vous allez recommander la fin du programme dans ce temps-là. Mais est-ce que vous avez une idée, d'après soit ce que les autres municipalités ont fait avec des programmes semblables, à quel point, qu'est-ce que le tipping point, là, est-ce qu'on est rendu avec, OK, là, il commence à manquer d'espace à développer, les développeurs sont déjà en train de saliver pour développer, ils n'ont pas besoin d'incitatifs de plus. Avez-vous déjà une réflexion de là-dessus qu'on pourrait considérer au moment?
Merci, conseiller Bourgeois. Alors, on a eu cette discussion-là à l'interne, justement. Je suis aussi en discussion avec les autres municipalités, soit Riverview, Dieppe, Shediac, justement. On a toutes des dates qui sont très différentes. Certains ont un programme qui dure 4 ans. Je pense qu'on a une coupe qui expire juste dans 3 ans. Il y a certaines municipalités qui ont décidé de ne pas mettre de clause. Nous, on est très, je pense, proactif au point de vue de dire, OK, on a une date. C'est peut-être créer un peu d'urgence aussi pour appliquer, sinon vous ne pourrez peut-être pas bénéficier du programme plus tard. Mais nous, on a mis une clause dans l'entente qui n'est pas qu'est-ce que les autres municipalités ont nécessairement fait. Ils font une revue à tous les couples d'années ou au besoin aussi, le conseil décide. Mais certainement, on va voir qu'est-ce que les conditions d'une couple d'années, voir c'est quoi les autres opportunités. Je pense qu'il reste encore plusieurs années d'opportunités pour le centre-ville. Je pense que vous voyez, il y a certainement des espaces qu'on pourrait remplir avec du commercial, du résidentiel pour créer plus de logements au centre-ville. Alors, je pense qu'il y a plusieurs années de reste pour des opportunités pour Moncton.
OK. 2 sous-questions, celle-là. Je vous laisse réfléchir. Ce n'est pas une question avec une réponse que je m'attends aujourd'hui, là, parce que c'est une discussion de 10 000 pieds. Lorsqu'on aura... Il ne faudrait pas qu'on arriverait non plus à la fin... On dit qu'on va venir à la fin 2027. Il faudra probablement, lorsqu'on viendra à considérer la terminaison, là, puis peut-être que vous pourrez réfléchir lorsque vous ferez la réflexion en 2027, là, je ne suis peut-être pas là. Ça fait une suggestion. Il faudrait probablement donner aux développeurs 1 an ou 2 ans d'avance pour lui dire on est en train de sérieusement, juste pour voir si ça va accélérer ou ils ne vont pas attendre à la dernière minute. Je pense que ça pourrait les encourager. Ma plus grosse préoccupation, c'est si on ne le fait pas en même temps, c'est pour ça que j'essaie de voir la date, puis si Dieppe puis Riverview sont peut-être pas tout à fait dans le même marché que nous autres là, à ce niveau-là, mais quand même, Dieppe pourrait se virer de bas puis dire « Ah, OK, Moncton finit son programme, nous autres, on va le continuer pour 1 an ou 2 ans après, puis parce qu'on a déjà eu des compétitions malsaines entre les parcs industriels, entre Dieppe et Moncton qui venaient poacher. Je ne suis pas au courant de Moncton qui allait poacher de Dieppe, mais je suis au courant d'instances où Dieppe venait poacher de nos parcs industriels là, sous MID. Ça fait... Il faudrait probablement essayer de synchroniser ça entre les 3 municipalités. Je ne crois pas que Shediac est tout à fait dans notre champ de compétition, là, mais au moins Dieppe et Riverview, parce que quelqu'un qui veut venir s'installer dans la région de Moncton, là, OK, ben là, il y a un incitatif, là, il n'y en a pas. C'est peut-être ça qui va jouer, là, dépendamment de ce que les montants. Dans certains cas, ça fait une différence. Dans d'autres cas, ça n'en ferait pas. C'est juste une suggestion.
Alors, juste pour répondre, on va réfléchir à votre question. Certainement, il va y avoir de la consultation. Et nous, l'objectif est de rester compétitif avec les autres municipalités. Oui, on est en discussion. On était justement réunis avec la grande région ce matin. Alors, on a des discussions avec Dieppe et Riverview particulièrement. Alors, on va voir si on peut s'aligner. Puis je pense qu'on bénéficie... Le programme bénéficie de la région aussi, mais plus spécifiquement à bénéficier le centre-ville.
OK. Merci beaucoup. Je vous laisse ça. Question, puis ça, c'était vraiment minime. Là. Au début de la page... Ah, shit, faut que j'y aille le voir. Je l'ai perdu. Ça a sauté. Ça, c'est la page... 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ouais, début de la page 5. Première bulle. Ça dit, je comprends pas la phrase. Mention of the city should not put more pressure on developers. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, ça?
Alors, ça pour dire, conseiller bourgeois, c'est qu'on a été mentionné par certains développeurs que la ville de Moncton ne devrait pas mettre de pression sur les développeurs. Alors, pour ne pas créer plus de pression, parce qu'ils ont déjà des pressions, la discussion avec certains développeurs était des pressions, genre de CMHC ou les banques ou les taux, le terrain coûte plus cher, des choses que, plutôt, c'était plus mentionné que c'était mention mot par mot que la ville ne devrait pas mettre de pression. Elle l'a inclus dans le rapport, mais c'était justement une mention d'un développeur en particulier.
OK, parfait. Là, je comprends le sens de la phrase.
C'est pas nous qui l'a mis, c'est vraiment dû à une consultation avec le développement.
Non, je comprends. Ça veut dire developers mentioned that the city should not put more pressure. OK. J'étais juste confus, là. Question sur... Parce qu'on prend la définition, vous le proposez, là, fédéral, provincial. J'espère que les deux sont les mêmes. Corrige-moi, là. Province ne dit pas des critères différents que le fédéral?
Je peux peut-être me tourner à notre collègue Josh Davies qui fait plus avec l'abordable. Nous, on va par rapport à ce qui est provincial ou fédéral, mais je peux...
Generally speaking, we have the province and the federal government. They all have different programs and different levels of affordability depending on the program that we're looking at. So in review of the policy and looking at the terms and how we could define it so that we weren't creating ourselves an issue with a project that may not be based on MMR, it may be based on rent geared to income from an NB housing perspective, or from CMHC, it may be an MLR select. There's a lot of different programs coming through. So I would say that depending on the program, would be dependent on the level of affordability or the definition for that program. However, the way that the definition has been set up in the policy as proposed accounts for all those things, because those are programs that have been deemed affordable or qualify for those other programs, whether they're provincial or federal. So the wording is never exact across the board, but the way that the policy has written, as I mentioned, that definition, it means that we're not going to get ourselves into a pigeonhole where we have a really nice project, but it can't qualify because it doesn't meet that 80% MMR, which was the gold standard historically. Now we're moving into a bit more of a flexible program where these programs will qualify based on the fact that other levels of government have deemed them affordable. So it's not to say that they're exactly the same, but they're generally all moving in the same direction.
Okay. Specifically, concretely, I'll give you an example. CMHC, I think, calculates based on the median income of a census metropolitan area, right? And that would mean, for instance, if it's, $45,000, the median, not average, but medium income, that translates for the CMHC into $1,400 a month rent.
Sure.
Okay, ballpark numbers.
Yep.
Does the province have programs that are produce an amount of monthly income to be dedicated that is different from that 1,400?
Some do. So my understanding of, if you look at the provincial programs, is that they're built more towards the rent geared to income. So they may be more around, it's the 30% of your income that quantifies. Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas the federal government, the CMHC programs that we historically have dealt with are more for market affordable. So I think the province sort of fills the gap with respect to that lower level of affordability to the person at the 30%, and the federal government has that larger market lens in terms of with the developers that are saying it's not 1,700 or 1,800 a month, but the affordability rate for them gets it down to 1,500 or 1,400, depending on the project. So I'd say the province, again, I guess to answer your question more simply, is that they're looking more at the individual on those PDOR grant bases that you'll see Rising Tide and other groups speak to, the nonprofits, and then the federal one is a bit more wide open to market and non-market developers, depending on the program that would work best for each applicant.
Okay. And I think I know the answer, but I want to confirm it. We can't tell the CMHC that the median income in Moncton is significantly lower than the median income in Dieppe, for instance. So when you look at the CMA, Dieppe, because there's more doctors living there or whatever, if you look at Statistics Canada data, the last time I checked, I may be wrong, Dieppe had a higher median income and also an average income superior to Moncton, so it skewers
the CMA.
So can we break down the CMA if we wanted to have a policy just for Moncton? We could calculate, or the CMHC is going to insist we stay with this centrist metropolitan area?
We can certainly ask, but my understanding is that the way that number is informed is that all of the kind of the quadrants, or how CMHC breaks down the city, would show in the city of Moncton specifically what that median rate would be. So it may be that those developers, and we can find out as well as if are they getting 88% MMR for CMA of the city, or are they getting it for Moncton? Because each quadrant, as I mentioned, has their own data, which then ultimately feeds up to the entire CMA. So that information would be available, but that's certainly a question that administration can take on and clarify, certainly.
Thank you, I'd appreciate that. There's this, in discussing the grant evaluation form, the definition of active transportation was replaced with the new criteria that distinguish short-term from long-term bicycle parking. Trails and sidewalks are also part of active transportation. Does this policy reflect that, or are we limiting our focus to bicycles?
To answer your question, Councillor Bourgeois, this was basically in the active transportation section, so I believe we were only looking at bicycle. That was the focus. So we're trying to encourage more developers to put more, and there's been one recently, they're putting bike storage in their unit, so whether in the basement or the main floor, so it's to accommodate more. So we're seeing uptake on that. So it's basically meaning a safe place for their bicycle indoors, not necessarily outdoors. There's like two, that's why the short term and the long terms is now divided in two sections. That wasn't previously.
Okay, so we're sort of encouraging them to have more bicycle parking.
Yes, and this is one way to encourage them. While we're having conversation, they can actually score more points if they do short and long-term spaces.
Okay, and my final question, and probably to Josh more than to Luc, and it's probably going to be discussed or recommended or addressed by the planning committee, but is there anything in this policy or criteria that would allow us to impose or to encourage mixed developments?
They, in some cases, so they do need to, they're getting more points if they're a mixed-use development. So the development contains a mix of at least two land uses, so residential, retail, and restaurant office. So that is to, in some cases, some development would need to create that mixed use to qualify. If you're only building a residential unit and you don't qualify for the others, you might not get enough points. But by creating a restaurant or a coffee shop on the main floor, and that's what we're encouraging developers to do. And that's what we're seeing the mixed use application coming in as.
Yeah, I meant mixed integrated.
Yep.
So
Yeah, so-
different social level, socioeconomic levels within the same residences.
The timing of this works so well in terms of the extension that's being requested, in terms of when the municipal plan is intended to be concluded or has been adopted maybe for a few months. I would say that the policy direction and the discussions that we will take to the downtown will kind of re-identify or affirm what the priorities for the downtown are. And again, to your point, if the integrated housing, but it may also be encouraging public-private recreational space. There's a lot of things in the downtown that we may see come out of this committee and maybe out of the big moves or out of the policy directions. So what I would say is that once we have that policy direction and we have that newly minted municipal plan, it will tell us what the priorities are for the downtown. And then when we go through the comprehensive review that Luke and his team will lead, is we'll be able to feed that information and then reflect that through scoring or however those applications are brought in at that time. But I would say not just the integrated housing, but there's lots of ways, and there may be other strategies that can be used to achieve that in the downtown and beyond that is not necessarily tied to this program, but other options that will be available as well to try to achieve the same thing, but not necessarily through that one avenue.
Okay, and again, I may not be here in 6 months or whenever you do the review and everything else. I'm seriously concerned about us in any way, shape, or form encouraging more expensive rentals, $1,400 and more. A lot people, probably most people in the city would consider that not to be defined as affordable housing.
Yeah.
It would either be medium or high end. And I'm afraid that with not us, CMHC, but calculations, unless we are flexible, that we're going to have two kinds of building moving forward. One is the high-end and medium-end buildings, and then there'll be the rising tide, affordable housing, and the government of New Brunswick segregated housing. I'm just afraid that I don't know if we can all address in this specific policy that does encourage this kind of development.
Yeah.
But if there's a way to have a passerelle between the two, that we keep an eye out to make sure that we're not segregating geographically.
Yeah, I think we can certainly, we'll take that on board, and it's something I know that we've been discussing in terms of what's feasible. And I think too, like the important thing to remember is that this original policy was around converting essentially parking lots to development, and what's come with that, the cost of development, and I think part of the reason why those unit costs are so high is it's never been so expensive to build as well. So getting those buildings framed and ready for finishing, that's where the cost is getting to $1,700 or $1,800 a month. It's not the finishes of the countertops and the flooring. So those are some of those things that we can take on too with respect to maybe it's not this financial incentive plan that's going to help us get that ultimately that integrated project or that integrated sort of type development. But we will then, if that is the direction through policy, through the direction of the new municipal plan, then those are things that we've said that we were going to take on. Then that will allow us to explore them in greater depth and come to council with recommendations as to how we feel like we can achieve that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. If there are no other questions, we will go to the vote. Donc, électronique. Could we close the votes? Is that correct? C'est bon. Motion carried unanimously. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Luc. Conseiller Richard, est-ce qu'il est là? Ah, il y a des items. Are there items? Are there items under councillor? Non?
Oui.
Oui, conseiller Richard, on vous voit très bien.
Ah, c'est beau, c'est fun d'être vu. So just to clarify for the recorder, at the beginning of the meeting, you asked for show of hands for the agenda, for the minutes. I had my hand lifted, but nobody could see me. I pressed my button and I wasn't recognized, so just for the recorder, as long as that's captured. And I had no conflict of interest in the meeting as well. You also asked, Madison, 5.2 asked if everybody was comfortable with the suggestion before we go to the vote. And I put my head forward, again, when we saw me, I pressed the button, it wasn't captured, so I just wanted to clarify that for the meeting, and also, to the CAO. I think he's aware that I had issues today during the meeting. That's one issue. Unless I press my button, I can't be seen or heard. But I did press my button, and I wasn't seen or heard. So I'm not sure if Confero is to be looked at again, or technology is what we were expecting or not.
Merci pour le commentaire, Conseiller Richard. Yeah, we're going to do a debrief after today's meeting, find out exactly how that all occurred, and then we'll get back to council on what we found out. And again, yeah, share your frustrations.
Frustrations, yeah, very much. And I really do appreciate staff that helped me, that I was able to talk to in between. I really appreciate that help. But it's not them. It's what we're trying to work with that's not working with us.
Est-ce que, conseiller Richard, c'est vous qui allez clore la réunion? Là?
Je peux, mais je suppose qu'à 2 autres, qu'à 3 autres, vous sont allumés.
Attendez, conseiller Richard. Je pense qu'il y a des questions. Conseiller, excuse-moi, conseiller Richard. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la maire. Juste pour faire de pouce à ce que le conseiller Richard a mentionné. Ça fait, je crois, au moins une fois, c'est pas 2 fois que j'ai demandé une sorte d'évaluation du nouveau système, à savoir est-ce que c'est ce qu'on avait visé comme objectif. Je m'en souviens pas d'avoir pris la décision de changer le système. Je sais pas si c'était avant moi, mais en tout cas, le moment. Ça serait de la fun qu'on sonde les membres du conseil. C'est juste nous, vraiment, là, avant le prochain conseil, on savait comment est-ce qu'on fonctionnait avec le vieux système, comment est-ce on a encore un modèle hybride. Là, aujourd'hui, on levait la main, puis des fois, il faut qu'on attende 20 secondes avant de voter. Puis il y a des choses qu'on devrait regarder au complet. Pas juste ce qui est arrivé aujourd'hui. Moi, j'ai eu beaucoup de problèmes avant. Les techniciens sont superbes, ils travaillent très fort pour réparer les problèmes. Mais il y a des réunions que je n'ai pas pu participer ou juste participer après une demi-heure par le temps que j'ai arrangé mes problèmes. Je ne suis pas trop sûr que ça marche. Moi, en général, je dis que ça ne marche pas aussi bien que ça marchait avant. Pour moi, comme conseiller, à distance, mais peut-être que pour les autres, c'est juste moi. Merci, Madame la maire.
Conseiller Bourgeois. Excellente suggestion. Donc, je pense qu'il y a 2 collègues qui sont en ligne. Conseiller Kingston, est-ce que vous voulez prendre la parole? Oui, on vous voit et on vous entend.
Came back eventually after some regroups and repowering up. Again, there's definitely bugs, and I guess the voting works well, but again, not seeing management. And there's a request to speak, and then it's a little bit on the rocky side. So I know we're striving for the same goal, and working together. I just wanted to point that out in my case. I read the unfortunate today, a storm day being the voting, so here I am. Thank you for listening, and merci, conseil, doing that on that.
Merci, conseiller Kingston. Conseiller Léger.
Oui, merci, Madame la Maire. I guess this has been the second meeting in a row because I'm on Prince Edward Island, unfortunately, with a sick friend. But just would be nice would be some monitoring from your end, and not you, Madame la Maire, but from staff's end. I think the system itself is, in at least my experience, these last 2 meetings has been very good. The only thing, though, is, as pointed out, when you ask for a vote of hands, we're ignored because we're out here. And that's not your job, Madame Menendez, by the way, but somebody has to take that responsibility. They did, though, accommodate by moving the screen that I see. I can see myself, and I can see that I'm currently looking at Mayor Terrio. But when somebody's presenting, the presenter was behind where I could see. So staff today moved things around. But I think it's an opportunity to to see what we can do in terms of increasing the system. I don't find it as good I don't find it as good as WebEx, to be honest with you, because at least if I wanted to be heard, I can just interrupt. I can't do that. I have to click, and then somebody at your end has to recognize that I clicked and I'm in line to speak. So somehow, maybe a couple of members of staff need to be online and at the same time, and we need to troubleshoot and figure out what it is that people who unfortunately can't be at the meeting are going through, and maybe that would be helpful. So, but I give 100% to technical staff. They're really good. Justin's been great at making sure that things work, and I don't know who's doing that today for the others, but anyway, the clarity though is excellent. But that's what I would say in terms of somebody needs to monitor and somebody needs to recognize that if we're going to participate from a distance, that we need to be part of the meeting. So if we change it and we say raise our hands, somebody needs to say we need to look at the camera to see if Councillor Lucier or Councillor Butler or not Butler, but Councillor Kingston is on it. So those are the things I think that we just need to work through them. It's unfortunate it's taken this long because we've had the system for a number of months. This is only the second time I've used them in the last few weeks. And I'm thinking I understand where others who have used it long before me are frustrated. So maybe we could work through that. Thank you.
Merci, conseiller Léger. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres commentaires? Sinon, conseiller Richard, vous êtes toujours là? Oui, c'est ça, donc... motion, non, je sais pas. Oui, c'est beau, merci beaucoup. C'est beau.